let's wrap with this. I finally was able to finish and release the Ja Morant video this week. I had wanted to do something on him probably since the opening week of the season. He came out, guns blazing, just on fire, and he missed 12 games with his knee injury. And what did Memphis end up doing? They didn't really do anything special in those games, right? Did they? What did they end up doing?
No, they just had like a plus 16 net rating or something like that, which would just blow the 71 Bucks and the whatever other all-time teams
Bulls.
out of the water.
Yeah.
96 Bulls.
Yeah,
Someone's going to be mad that wasn't the first all-time team I thought of.
They went 10-2, and they did have a ridiculous net rating. Even if you take out their 73-point exhibition game,
they beat the Thunder by 73 points.
Yeah, that doesn't really count. That's so much of an outlier. We don't even know what to make of it. That was like popcorn night where was that game? Was that game in Memphis?
It was in hell for Oklahoma City Thunder.
That game was bring your child to work day for the Oklahoma City Thunder, and they took it very literally. Even if you remove that game, they still had really, really strong point differential. I want to say around 8 to 11. It was big, and they went 10-2. But as I pointed out in the video, I had made most of this video before he got injured, and then as this was happening, I thought, well, does this become a completely different video? But as I watched them, both without him and with him, it was very hard for me to pinpoint what was different. I think defensively, their effort was a little better. I think when a player goes out, especially a young team, that's the thing. A young team is trying, the Grizzlies, independent of Ja's injury, were trying to find the right lineups, the right balance, the right gelling. Dylan Brooks was injured early, and then he came back. Desmond Bane is trying to find his footing. His footing might not even be the wrong word. He's playing really well, but it's like there's just a ton going on there. Jaren Jackson continues to improve. He's getting the defense back. He's, without Ja, his scoring goes up. He's raining a bunch of three-pointers. So there's a ton going on with this team. And as I watched it, my hypothesis was essentially that if I can't really tell that big of a difference, this may have happened with Ja there anyway. We'll never know, but it seems like it may have happened. And therefore, the 73-point win aside and some hot games, what is the rest of the season going to look like? And if the rest of the season looks pretty good for Memphis and they finish with home court, then this becomes less of a, are they better without Ja thing and more of a, they just started to get hot right around that time and it was a coincidence. And as I mentioned in the video, I decided that was the direction. It's just not worth doing a whole video on it because when you look up the indicators for variance, they had absolutely bonkers shooting luck. Bonkers. Worth 11 points per game when Ja was out versus when Ja was in. Like you're talking about, if you look at all the open and wide open threes on NBA.com, you're talking about they shot 31% against the Grizzlies when Ja was out and 40 or 41% when he's in. And I'm a believer that those numbers can change a little bit depending on the quality of your defense. If you don't have to work quite as hard for that open shot, if you didn't have to run around along the screen, if it comes with 3 seconds on the shot clock and you're kind of time pressured versus 12 seconds on the shot clock, I think those things are real, but not 10 percentage points. That's crazy. And then you add in the fact that they had a softer schedule where not only were they playing easier teams that sometimes help you find that groove as a young and up-and-coming team, but also they were playing teams that had guys out for COVID, like you catch Philadelphia and Embiid's out, and they just kind of had that a bunch. And so that ended up being my take, and we'll see what happens in the next month or two, but I'm kind of riding with that the Grizzlies probably would have done something like this anyway. The team I would point to, I don't think they're going to be as good. I don't think Memphis is going to really crack like the top 5 or 6 teams this year. But the team I would point to, just to make it really salient for folks, the 1999 Spurs, Tim Duncan's second year. You've got your Twin Towers stuff. You've got Popovich as the coach. David Robinson is now back. He's finding his role as maybe not the pure alpha guy. You're working in 3-and-D play Jaren Jackson, and they started, I want to say they were under 500 in the strike shortened season. Something like that. They were like 6-9 to start the year, and then they just blitzed the league the rest of the way. So it is not unheard of or super uncommon for teams who need to come together and gel to have a bumpy part of the beginning of the season and then hit their stride. And I feel like that just may have happened with Ja getting injured, like literally at that exact. I mean, the game he got injured, they lost by 32 points. So he played like 5 minutes and they lost by 32 points. So if you start adding that stuff in to the data, it starts to look a little bit more reasonable. Anyway, we'll see what happens. That's my take on that.
I think Jaren Jackson's a really interesting player to specifically zoom in on this because in games, and I looked this up probably, I actually think I do have all the Grizzlies games involved, but when Jaren plays in the same game that Ja plays, he's scoring like 19.8 per 75 on -5 efficiency. And in those games when Ja was out, he ballooned up to like a 26 per 75 on a plus 3% shooting. So his efficiency skyrocketed like 8 percentage points, which it just feels wrong that he would shoot that much better without Ja Morant, who's just so good at creating some of those open shots for players with his ridiculous driving ability.
Yeah. It's in the video. You can see it. There's a ton of missed threes off of Ja's kickouts, and those are from all those early games. And Jaren, at the first couple games of the year, I want to say off the top of my head, he really struggled from three. And I just think he's a better shooter than that. I think he thinks he's a better shooter. But sometimes you come in the offseason, you put work in the weight room, you practice all your stuff, you're really excited, the intensity ramps up. You want to work on your defense, which is probably a bigger thing even for him to stay out of foul trouble. And you just have like 5 or 7 games where you're like, he was absurd. He was like 4 for 30. I'm making that up. That's not the exact number. But if we pulled it up, he had a really, really bumpy stretch. And so I think to your point, that from individual players can compound when the whole team kind of is hot or cold at one time.
So something I did want to ask you about
is
that you were able to address like the fact that shooting variance probably accounted for a big chunk of it. But the fact is that, so Ja's played in, I think, 25 games right now. The Grizzlies are still only 13-12 in games that he's played, and they have a -3 net rating. So, like, where do you think they actually are right now? Because we have this weird outlier stretch where their shooting variance is ridiculous. Their shooting luck is ridiculous. We have this stretch where they're like a middling, actually maybe worse than 500 team when Ja is playing. Dylan Brooks is out for a good chunk of time here.
Yep.
What are the Grizzlies? And I know you just use the Spurs as an analogy, but
yeah, they're not the Spurs. But I do think they're one of those young up-and-coming teams like the 2010 Oklahoma City Thunder. I do think they're somewhere in that range. I can't remember where the Thunder finished in terms of margin of victory or SRS or anything like that, but I expect Memphis. I'm getting so hot takey here, Cody. Here we go.
I love it.
No, I just looking at the standings and the way they're playing, I expect Memphis to have home court in the West, which kind of means they're locked into that 4 spot because I don't think, barring injuries, you're going to catch any of those 3 juggernaut teams way out in front. But who's going to catch them from behind?
I'm literally pulling up Basketball Reference right now as you ask this.
I mean, I think Denver, if they get healthier, is a real answer there. They can rattle off wins. I think, people in Los Angeles, the Lakers, I don't know if the Clippers are just going to be healthy enough. Paul George is out for a few more weeks. I like the Clippers, but I think to catch Memphis at this point, you'd probably have to play at like a 50-win pace if you're one of those teams. Can we just, for posterity, get the records of Memphis and the teams behind them? Do you have that in front of you?
Yeah, so Memphis is the 4th seed right now, and they're 23-14.
Yep.
Denver is directly behind them, 18-16. So there's still even a few wins behind them. Clippers are in 6th with 19-18. And then 7th, Lakers 19-19, Dallas 18-18, Minnesota 16-20.
So Dallas is another team that could potentially play better. But again, you're 18-18. That's 4.5 behind Memphis, 5 in the wins column. we're almost at the halfway point. Part of this is I just think Memphis is going to play well the rest of the way. You know, I don't know what that leaves them for a final win total or even margin of victory, but I think at this point, Cody, I'd be kind of surprised if they're like a mid-40s +2 team, and I expect them to be more like, you know, can they get a 5 in front of their win total at the end of the season, and then what's their final SRS margin of victory? 4, something like that, maybe.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's kind of I see them as the 4th best team in the West right now.
Thanks for listening. You can find the full episode of This Thinking Basketball podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you enjoy podcasts.